Devil's purse in the human world. People often say that there are many strange species of ghosts. Among those species, sometimes their names have never been mentioned before. But when described, they still make people afraid. 2,000 years ago, a struggle for the throne of the Hung King broke out in the Hong Bang era. This gave rise to the most ancient ritual of worshipping gods of the Vietnamese people. They sacrificed living girls to the river god, the sea god, the mountain god, and even to the monsters in the sky and earth to hope for peace. Before Long Quan appeared to eliminate the demon race, these forms were still very popular to pray for the preservation of life for the community. And since then, the demon race was born. The ritual of unintentionally creating a demon by the Vietnamese people is to sacrifice a virgin girl, slit her throat and stuff a fish bladder that looks like a bag into her neck so that she cannot speak or feel pain. Just enough to breathe and enough to let blood flow out. Waiting for the river god or mountain god, to put it bluntly, a monster, to come and capture and eat the girl to spare them. After the girls die, they are unjustly unable to be released, and often turn into vengeful souls who kill people to take revenge. They sit on the riverbank, stream bank, waterfall, in a very miserable and desolate way. Mr. Dai's family is one of the households with the largest forest land in the area. However, it is also the poorest family in the commune. Mr. Dai has been struggling with his forestry job for the past few years. And he does not want to change jobs because he has fallen in love with the forestry job. No matter what others say, Mr. Dai will not quit his job. Which is probably why his family's situation cannot improve. Mr. Dai has a younger brother named Nian, who is more than 10 years younger than him. If outsiders look at him, they would think that Nian and Mr. Dai are uncle and nephew. For the past few years, Nian has been studying in the city, and has been living there. It is said that he has been working in a book printing factory, and is also a skilled accountant. However, Nian cannot help Mr. Dai much with financial matters because he himself is poor. Mr. Dai did not have many children. He only had one daughter, little Nian, with Mrs. Siu. Nian was 4 years younger than Nian, but much more childish. Up to now, Nian had finished her senior year, but could not find a job she liked. Nian loved singing, but Mr. Dai never allowed her to pursue that career. Perhaps because of that, Nian's studies were getting worse and worse, because she discovered that her passion for singing was too great. She could accept anything just to sing. But her family's expectations always went against her dreams. Nian worked in the city for a few years and was quite famous. He was not rich, but he had enough. Several times when he came back, he saw that his niece was passionate about singing, and he also saw that her brother was stubborn. So he only dared to secretly buy her some music books and music theory books without letting Mr. Dai know. Mrs. Siu knew about this but did not forbid it. Only told Nian to be careful not to let Mr. Dai know. Otherwise, if he was stubborn, Nian would suffer. In Mr. Dai's opinion, the singing career was never good. People had a saying that singing was a lowly profession. In the past, this career was also severely condemned. Singing and performing were both despised and looked down upon by the whole society. And this old-fashioned ideology was always deeply ingrained in Mr. Dai's subconscious and could not be eliminated. The cicadas continued to chirp all day long in the scorching heat. Swallow diligently threw the potatoes into the charcoal stove to roast them. The smell of the burnt potato skin mixed with the sweet, delicious aroma of the golden potatoes made Swallow lick his lips. While waiting for the sweet potato to cook, Nyan suddenly heard Mrs. Siu calling, "Nyan, go up the hill and call your dad to come back here. Uncle Nyan from Hanoi just came to visit your dad." There was a commotion upstairs. The hurried talking of many people. Hearing about Uncle Nyan that Mrs. Siu mentioned, Nyan happily ran upstairs. Out of breath, "Uncle Nyan, when you come back, did you buy me a gift? That harmonica?" In front of Nyan appeared a young man in his 20s with a bright face. Looking at Nyan running towards him and smiling. When Nyan stood in front of Nyan, she saw Nyan stroking her hair and saying, "You're an adult. Not a child anymore. You're only 4 years younger than me. There's no shortage of good things to do in the city. Why do you insist on a harmonica? And if your dad finds out that I bought you a harmonica, he'll blame me." Nyan brushed Nyan's hand away and said in a resolute voice, "I need a harmonica to concentrate on my studies. To get into university and go to the city. If my dad doesn't let me study music, I'll study secretly. When I become famous, and have a lot of money, I'll build a house and buy a car for my dad. At that time, my dad won't blame me." Nyan clicked his tongue several times. Then pulled out a brand new harmonica from his breast pocket and said, "Here. The new trumpet. Now don't make excuses to be negligent. Focus on studying well and tomorrow go to the city to study. Then do whatever you want." Nyan nodded happily, eyes wide open. Then quickly snatched the harmonica from Nyan's hand and ran away. Nyan watched as Nyan's figure disappeared and just clicked his tongue and said to Mrs. Siu, "This girl will grow up one day and many of you will be tired of her. She is so stubborn that she keeps forcing me to buy her that trumpet. And once she decides to learn music, it will be hard to stop her." Mrs. Siu also smiled and said, "He's just whining to you. But normally our family is poor. He never dares to say a word to ask me to buy him anything. During the last rice harvest, I sold some rice. I planned to buy him a new set of clothes to keep up with his friends. But after buying them, he made me take them all the way to the place to return them." Nyan nodded, sat down and drank the cup of strong tea that Mrs. Siu had poured out earlier. Then asked again, "So, when I go to the city, have you thought about what major I should study?" Mrs. Siu shook her head, "I'm so bored. It's hard to find a job in any field these days. In my hometown, the only thing we can do is farming. My husband and I are both ignorant and can't think of any good solutions. Luckily, you work in the city. You have a quick mind. Can you help us think about what school our child should go to?" Nyan was thoughtful for a moment. Pondered and thought. Then spoke, "She is so eager to study music. But it is very difficult to find a job after graduating from that school. She is stubborn and refuses to give up. So I advise you to let her study economics like me. And I will provide for her. You should hide it from Dai. Otherwise he will not let her go to the city anymore." Poor girl. Mrs. Siu nodded back and forth repeatedly to thank Nyan. Mixed with her thanks were tears flowing because she could not fulfill her daughter's wish. Nyan then asked the next question, "So when does Dai usually come back from the forest?" Mrs. Siu replied immediately, "He comes home every mealtime. But today, if you come down and Nyan goes to call him, he will definitely come home right away. Today, he planted seedlings right at the edge of the forest." As soon as Mrs. Siu finished speaking, Mr. Dai's voice immediately echoed outside the gate, "Uncle Nyan is coming home." Nyan smiled and replied, "Yes. I have to go back to the commune to do some paperwork, so I'll stop by to visit you. Mr. Dai entered the house, took off his pith helmet and placed it under the table. He took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat from his face and neck. Then he poured a cup of tea, and drank it all in one gulp. Then he looked at Nyan and asked in a deep voice, "When you got home, did you stop by your parents' grave to burn incense?" Nyan nodded and replied, "I just came back from my parents' grave. I also plan to come back here early because I have something to ask you." Mr. Dai asked in surprise, "You also have a favor to ask of me? I'm barefoot and blind like this. What can I do for you? My mind is slow." The man clicked his tongue and said, "I want to politely refuse you again. But this time I can't do it without your help. And it's not just asking for help. The company will also pay me. Very well. Up to several $1 million. Mr. Dai opened his eyes wide and looked at Nyan and asked, "So much? What do you do to get so much money?" The man solemnly said, "I heard that our area has a cave that goes deep underground. Is that true? Some scientists came back from abroad and wanted to explore that cave. But they didn't know the way. I went through that cave a few times when I was a kid. But I can't remember now. When I was a kid, I always got lost. I didn't mean to go there." Mr. Dai asked again, "You mean the bat cave in the forest?" Nyan nodded and said, "Yes. That's it." Mr. Dai closed his eyes and thought for a moment. Then opened them and said, "No one dares to go into that cave anymore. I heard that many people have gone missing in the past few months. Every time they go into the forest and get close to the cave, they go missing. The commune even sent militia to look for them, but they couldn't find them." Nyan said, "This time, they went in a group, not individually. Moreover, they even hired security guards. The disappearances were probably kidnappings. Nothing strange? When people go in large groups, the kidnappers don't dare to do anything." Mr. Dai nodded and said, "Okay then. If there is security, I don't mind. When you were a kid, you hid in that bat cave several times for me to find you. You still remember it clearly. Thinking back to that time, luckily I was tactful. Otherwise you would have had to get beaten up by your father." Nyan smiled and replied, "When I was little, I didn't know anything. When Fo and Dat invited me, I just closed my eyes and ran into the forest. Every time I closed my eyes and ran straight, I would definitely reach that place. Normally, I would walk straight with my eyes open but wouldn't be able to find that cave." "That's interesting." Mr. Dai nodded and asked again, "When will they be back? You're not leaving right away, are you?" The man shook his head and said, "I'll come back until the matter is over. Tomorrow, the group will be coming down here. And there might be someone coming down earlier tonight to prepare. After I discuss the matter with you, I also have to go to the district to find a hotel room to book for them to stay. And if you're free tonight, come with me to meet them and discuss. If you speak fluently, they might even give you a bonus so you can comfortably buy seedlings." Mr. Dai slapped his thigh and said, "Of course. I have a younger brother who works in the city. This time, the whole commune will be amazed to see me buying rubber trees to cover the bare hills. Soon, I will build a house and buy a car. And maybe even have enough money to travel." Nyan nodded and said, "Yes. You can dream on. But first, prepare a good story for me. People in the city are very sharp. If you just lie, they will reveal it right away. You can't hide it. So I advise you not to flatter too much. Just enough? I will defend you. Mr. Dai nodded in agreement. After chatting for a while, he left. Mr. Dai went to the back garden to prepare some food and tools to fertilize the seedlings. Waiting until the afternoon, he received a call from Nian. Please go to the commune entrance right away. There is a car coming to pick you up. The person from the province has returned. He said he wants to see you to talk. Mr. Dai was so happy that he stopped paying attention to the seedlings. He threw the plants into the corner of the house and then ran straight to the commune headquarters. When he got there, Mr. Dai saw the commune chairman shaking hands and smiling and chatting with a foreigner with white skin and blue eyes. When Mr. Dai had just reached the gate, someone came out to urge him, "Is that you? Uncle Dai? Come here quickly. The commune chairman has endless praise for you. If you appear in the newspaper this time, say a few words for our commune. He is the one who made this a big deal." Even on TV. Grabbing Mr. Dai's hand was a young man about 20 years old. A security guard at the commune headquarters. The young man's name was Ki. Also a quick-talking person. When he saw Mr. Dai coming, he immediately clung to him, hoping to enjoy Mr. Dai's reputation. Mr. Dai curled his lips slightly in disdain, thinking back to the matter of asking for subsidies to support forest planting. These security guards were not usually this enthusiastic. But now that they saw him enjoying a little achievement, they swarmed around like flies wanting to lick honey. How could they not despise him? Mr. Dai walked into the middle of the yard and saw a middle-aged man reaching out to shake his hand and greet him. Mr. Dai did not understand what was going on but still shook the man's hand. After a while, the man introduced himself. "I am Du Hoang Quan, a PhD in geology. Nice to meet you." Mr. Dai opened his eyes wide in surprise and said, "Oh my God. Now I get to meet a real doctor. What a blessing." Dr. Quan was delighted and felt a little proud, but quickly changed the subject and said, "I'm just passing through here. Now I'd like you to come with us to town for dinner. I want to ask you a few questions tonight. Is it convenient for you?" Mr. Dai stammered, "Convenient, of course. I'm free all day. All I have to do is feed the pigs and dig in the forest. Don't worry, doctor." Dr. Quan nodded and said, "Okay then." After Dr. Quan finished speaking, he greeted the people in the commune and then urged Mr. Dai to quickly get in the car to return to the district, back in town. Dr. Quan led Mr. Dai into a hotel room. Inside, 4 people were waiting as if they had been told. When they saw Mr. Dai enter, they immediately nodded and smiled, greeting him casually. Dr. Quan introduced each member of the group in turn, then looked at Mr. Dai and explained, "This time, our relic exploration team was sponsored by an international organization to explore ancient caves in our province. Unfortunately, the pine forests in your commune are so dense that unless you are passing by, you cannot enter." Dr. Quan paused for a moment, then walked over to a map covered in strange patterns, pointed at it with his finger. He said, "According to the historical documents we have researched, plus the inferences of the country's leading scholars, we have concluded that in this area there is a cave containing historical relics dating back about 2,500 years, belonging to the Hongbang period of the Han kings. We suspect that it contains the secret of the ancient script mentioned in the historical records. The Koadao script, or also known as fire script." Mr. Dai heard this and opened his mouth wide. After a while he stupidly said, "Is that tiny bat cave full of secrets?" I don't know. But when I was little, kids used to go in there to play. And peed all over the walls. But they didn't see anything. Not even. Mr. Dye was talking carefully for a while when he was suddenly interrupted by a cough. He turned around and realized that the cough came from Nyan. Nyan had been sitting behind one of the three people asking questions for a long time without Mr. Dye knowing. Hearing Nyan's suggestion, Mr. Dye did not dare to continue acting on his own. Dr. Kwon saw that and immediately continued, "You don't know. Ancient people have many secrets. Although it is just a small cave. Thousands of years ago it could have been a large shelter. Over time, the cave was largely destroyed. So it shrank to this size. Many documents point to this cave as the clue. So we must clarify the hypothesis once and for all. We should not just judge by its surface, but also analyze it carefully from many aspects." At this moment, he also stood up and clapped his hands in response, saying, "Comrade Kwon is so right. We cannot work based on emotions. This is the quick and professional style that everyone needs to grasp and learn from him." Several people in the whole school clapped their hands and laughed heartily. Dr. Kwon was delighted to see this, feeling as if he was on cloud nine. So happy he couldn't speak. A moment later, Dr. Kwon woke up from his daze and looked at the people sitting in the room and said, "If we have prepared everything well, let's go eat and rest now. Tomorrow morning our group will depart." Dr. Kwon turned to look at Mr. Dye and said, "You can rest here for a day. Follow Mr. Nyan so he can explain the work and plan a suitable route to save us time." Then Dr. Kwon left the room. The others also left one by one. Only Nyan and Mr. Dye remained. Nyan looked at Mr. Dye and said, "I told you. Don't talk nonsense. Luckily I stopped you in time. Otherwise you would have ruined everything." Mr. Dye smiled and scratched his head, saying, "I've always been a person who says things like they are. Luckily you reminded me. Otherwise I would have told you about the incident where you peed in public with Dat and Fo." Nyan leaned down and whispered softly into Mr. Dat's ear, "Let me tell you. Among those people there is also your future sister-in-law. If you don't like me, you have to give me some face. Not everything can be said." Mr. Dye nodded, "I will pay close attention from now on. But they announced it earlier but I completely forgot. How much is this salary, uncle?" Nyan clicked his fingers and said, 10 million. You can buy seedlings as much as you want. Then in 10 years there will be a whole green forest named after you." Mr. Dye sighed, unable to say a word. Nyan patted Mr. Dye's shoulder for a while then left. Mr. Dye followed Nyan to have a quick meal and then went to sleep. To prepare his strength for tomorrow to lead a group of people into the forest, the next morning, a convoy of cars from town rolled down to the commune, carrying portable generators, lamps, tables, chairs. Everything was there. When the whole commune saw so many cars coming down, they clapped their hands and cheered happily like a spring festival. The convoy stopped at the edge of the forest. From now on, once inside the forest, it was impossible to go any further. The road for vehicles was only wide enough for a small motorbike. Anything heavy that could not be carried was put on the motorbike and taken inside. As for the things that could be carried, people carried them in their hands. The edge of the forest is where the residential area and the wild area intersect. Once past the edge of the forest, the entire group will be considered to have entered a completely different world. As he was about to enter the trail deep into the forest, Mr. Dye suddenly heard a call. That call was the call of little Nyan. He only heard Nyan cry out, "Dad! Dad!" Then he ran quickly from the field at the edge of the forest, to the edge of the forest. Mr. Dai was stunned for a moment, until he turned around and saw Nyan standing suddenly in front of him. So he shouted and asked, "Why did you follow your father here? Why don't you stay home and chop duckweed to feed the pigs?" Nyan stroked her hair and said pitifully, "I want to follow my dad and siblings into the forest. There are many interesting things there. But studying has been stressful lately. So I want to go into the forest, to relax my mind." Mr. Dai was about to refuse, when Nyan's voice interrupted, "Too much studying pressure is not good. In my opinion you should let him go with you. Anyway, going into the Bat Cave will only take one session today. It won't take too much time." Seeing Nyan had already spoken, Mr. Dai was not able to refuse. So he turned to glare at Nyan and said, "Uncle Nyan, since you said so, you can come along. But don't mess around or get lost. If you do anything stupid, I'll send you back." Nyan opened her eyes wide and nodded, looking satisfied. Then she secretly took out the harmonica that Nyan had bought for her from her pocket and put it to her mouth, blowing a few hollow sounds. While blowing, Nyan fell behind, trying her best not to let Mr. Dai hear, afraid that he would find out. Nyan, who was walking behind, saw this and immediately smiled, snatched the harmonica from Nyan's hand and said, "Let me play it for you today. Since you're going with the group, just practice playing the harmonica. When I get back to the city and I won't be teaching you anymore, you can practice by yourself. You're playing it wrong all the time." Nyan finished speaking and blew a sample piece of music. The lively sound of the harmonica in the middle of the forest rang softly in Nyan's ears, making the quiet space a little less lonely. Nyan listened attentively, occasionally cheering with delight. Along the way deep into the forest, Nyan kept practicing the piece of music that Nyan had taught him, playing it over and over again but still couldn't play it well. Nyan saw this and encouraged him, saying, "You have to practice for a whole month to be able to play this song smoothly. If you practice for a day and expect to be good at it, you won't be good at it." Hearing that, Nyan felt a little less sad and tried to practice even harder. Nyan's group went deeper into the forest for more than 30 kilometers. Because the forest path was difficult, the group had to travel from early morning until late at night to reach their destination. Before they could see the Bat Cave as Mr. Dai had said, they had to stop at a small stream to rest after a long journey that lasted for a whole day. They stopped to get some spring water to wash their faces to wake up, then continued on their way into the Bat Cave. The Bat Cave was deep in a ravine. The wind blowing fiercely made people always feel gloomy and cold. The Bat Cave was about a meter wide and round. People could see it was small from the outside. But who knew what secrets were hidden inside the Bat Cave? Dr. Kwon suddenly walked closer to Mr. Dai and asked, "Is this the Bat Cave after this stream?" Mr. Dai replied immediately, "Yes. The Bat Cave is only about 100 meters from the stream. When I was a kid, I often grabbed Nyan's neck there and..." Mr. Dai said halfway and realized that he had said something wrong. So he stopped himself without the time. Somewhere in the crowd, there was a steady sound of giggling. Mr. Dai glanced over to where the laughter came from, and discovered that it was a very young and beautiful girl. That girl was standing right next to Nyan. And he remembered that this girl seemed to have appeared in the hotel room the first day. Thinking carefully, Mr. Dai guessed that this was the future sister-in-law that Nyan was talking about. He looked at Nyan and only saw Nyan glare at him in annoyance, but did not say anything. Dr. Kwon nodded without saying anything, waiting another 30 minutes for everyone to rest comfortably. Then he ordered everyone to set off. The stream ahead was very fast flowing, but not too deep. The group carefully tried their best and finally managed to cross the stream. However, during this process, many people fell and rolled over because they stepped on mossy rocks. Many of them could only scream in pain. After crossing the stream and walking about 100 meters, a crevice in the rock appeared. Deep inside was a deep, pitch-black cave. Dr. Kwon did not say anything, immediately urging everyone to get inside. The first people to go were Nyan, Dr. Kwon and Mr. Dat.